Hey people of planet Earth, today we'll be looking at various weather mods for Fallout 4 as part of my new series that I'll probably make 2 episodes of before giving up and moving on to another failed venture. And this new series is called Mod Battle. Have you ever been browsing the Nexus or ModDB or Lover's Lab or and came across a mod that you thought would be good, but it turned out to be a piece of shit and better alternatives existed that did the same thing? I know I have. So that's why I've created this series, to save people from the mild annoyance of having to download another mod. And to save you even more time, I'll give you my conclusions right at the beginning of the video, before I examine any of the mods in depth, because I know you don't want to watch a long video with my ugly ass voice. I've tried out many different weather mods, namely NAC X Legacy Edition, Vivid Weathers, True Storms, Darker Nights, Calamity Weathers, Lightweight Lighting, and Clarity, a visual overhaul. I also tested the mod Weather Synergy that combines both Vivid Weathers and True Storms, as well as a patch mod that makes True Storms work with Clarity. There are 2 other mods I looked at, Nuclear Weathers and Radiant Clouds, but they're both outdated. Radiant Clouds seems to crash my game, and Nuclear Weathers mostly adds the same storms from NAC X, but with worse visuals, no configurability, and no gameplay effects as a result of these storms, so I'd highly recommend against downloading either of those mods. But out of the other mods, which ones would I recommend? Well, after trying them all out, I came to the surprising conclusion that, at least for my situation personally, none of them are really worth using. I'm running this game on a low-end card, and both NAC X and Vivid Weathers seem to increase GPU usage a lot during their fog and radstorm weathers, even if you have volumetric lighting disabled. The new visuals can be an improvement, sure, but I'd say they're not so much of an improvement that it's worth dropping my frame rate over. I think Fallout 4's vanilla weather isn't bad at all. Back in Fallout 3 in New Vegas, the sky was a low-detail mess and it never rained or became foggy. There was no overcast weather and it sucked ass. But Fallout 4 looks excellent by comparison, with a diverse array of weather types and even radiation storms. So to be honest, I think most people shouldn't even bother with weather mods in this game, unless they're for some reason dissatisfied with the vanilla system. Which raises the question of why some people wouldn't be satisfied. Well, some people might think the nights are too bright and want them to be darker. If that's your only problem, use the mod Darker Nights. If you don't like Fallout 4's bloom and depth of field and radial blur, use the Clarity mod. If you have both issues, then I wouldn't recommend loading both together, you might have bugs. Use the Lightweight Lighting mod instead. If you want a more detailed sky and higher weather variety than you can get in vanilla, then I'd recommend using Vivid Weathers. Or if you want a hardcore gameplay experience that's mostly the same as vanilla weather, then go with True Storms. The Darker Nights installer has compatibility patches for either mod. Now, if you want both better looking weathers and a more hardcore gameplay experience, you can use the Weather Synergy mod to combine both True Storms and Vivid Weathers to get the best of both worlds. Keep in mind that if you want to use Darker Nights with Weather Synergy, it will be a somewhat difficult installation process, and in the end you'll have a lot of plugins to deal with. So those were my recommendations, and any of the other mods that I mentioned at the start, I would absolutely not recommend for various reasons, which I'll get into in the second part of this video, which is about to start right now. We'll talk about NAC X Legacy Edition first. It doesn't have an installer, you just unpack it and enable the 3 plugins it comes in. Now, if you are going to use NAC, which I wouldn't recommend, you're also definitely going to want to install 2 mods, the NAC Rain Splash Killer and the Skin Tone Fix, because this mod attempts to add raindrops onto the ground, which would be a cool feature if it actually worked. The problem is it doesn't work. The raindrops are attached to the player character, not the ground. So that means if you jump, the raindrops will jump with you and you'll see them in midair. If you're on a sloped surface, then depending on the angle, the raindrops will either be in the air or they'll be under the ground. Unless you're standing on a completely flat surface, which is very rare, the raindrops will look like dog shit. So you'll need a mod to replace the raindrop meshes with blank files. As for the skin tones, I'm not sure why a weather mod would ever want to change the skin tones in the game in the first place, but these changes were not for the better. so you'll need a mod to revert those as well. Once you have all that installed, your trouble still won't be over because you're going to want to configure a lot of settings in-game. By default, NAC X has chem effects, so whenever you take a chem, your screen gets all fucked up and blurry. I hate that. I turn it off. There's also hit effects that, again, makes your screen get blurred and red when you get shot. I turn that shit off. There's functional sunglasses that I turn off. There's a lot of features that you're going to want to turn off. Some of the settings like bloom seem to be totally broken. You can't turn it off. That's annoying. I do like how you can switch to any weather on the fly, and you can also ban weathers from ever appearing again, which is a feature you're going to want to use because some of these weathers are very annoying. There's a time warp storm that slows down time occasionally, and I find it extremely annoying. It's also obviously not lore friendly. There's a firestorm that spawns fires all around you, which damage you, and they'll also lag your game out because those fire effects seem to use a lot of GPU power. There's a weather that starts with a nuke going off inside the skybox, which actually looks pretty cool, but it doesn't make any sense. But I do like how it looks, I have to admit. It looks better than the blowouts from Stalker, that's for sure. All of these storm weathers have a shelter mechanic where if you go underneath a building, you'll take no radiation damage. But I've found that this mechanic often doesn't work. Sometimes you think you're in shelter, but you're actually not. During the nighttime, this mod is pitch black, even during the clearest weathers. It might be realistic, maybe, but it sure as hell isn't playable for me. If you're going to use NAC X, definitely bring a night vision mod. This mod also makes interiors very dark, but there is a setting to change it back to vanilla, I believe. Still, I just don't like NAC very much. So let's move on to Vivid Weathers. Vivid Weathers has an installer unlike NAC. There's an option to disable volumetric fog, which is a good idea on a low-end machine. You can also enable an optional quest and player home, but I kept that off because I'm looking for a weather mod, not a quest mod. Unlike NAC, there's no way to blacklist weathers. You just have to pick a season and hope you chose the right one. I think summer might be a good choice if you don't like rain all the time, but I just chose no season limitation. Holy shit. Vivid Weathers can be controlled from a holotape that you can craft at a chemistry bench. There aren't nearly as many settings as NAC, but at least they all work. Vivid Weathers has dozens upon dozens of different weathers, but you'll quickly notice that most of them are just the same clear, cloudy, foggy, overcast presets with different cloud textures. And ironically, despite the name, Vivid Weathers actually look more bleak and monochromatic than the vanilla game does, to my eyes. Some people might like how it looks though, and if you don't, you can always increase the saturation effect. A real standout feature in this mod is the incredible looking sunsets and sunrises. Honestly, no matter what the weather conditions are, everything just looks incredible during these times of day. Nighttime is a little darker than vanilla, but it's not so dark that you can't see anything. I think it's a pretty good balance. Overall, I like Vivid Weathers. I think it's a hell of a lot better than NAC. I don't use it because it can increase GPU usage, but if you have a high-end GPU and you're sick of the vanilla weathers in the game, I think this is a pretty good choice. This might be the best choice, in fact. Next up, we'll look at True Storms, which also has an installer, and interestingly, it allows you to adjust the radiation damage in both the glowing sea and from the fog in Far Harbor to make them actually dangerous, which they are not in the vanilla game, even in survival mode. There's also options to have longer nights and to remove some of the volumetric fog effects for the sake of lower-end cards. Once you're in-game, you'll see that True Storms really doesn't add that many new weathers. There's just a couple of new storms. Radioactive fog, radioactive rain, dust storms, and that's about it. Everything else is the same as vanilla. The most interesting feature is the Ghoul Horde system, which spawns tons of ghouls during rad storms. But that's pretty much it. The storms do look a little better than vanilla, but not by much, to be honest. Next, we'll take a look at Clarity, which keeps the vanilla weather in place, but reduces fog, depth of field, bloom, and radial blur for more, well, clarity. I quite like how it looks, but it has some problems. Any interior that's not from the vanilla game won't be affected, and it will have to be patched if you want Clarity's interior changes to apply. But that's really the only downside, and it's not that big of a deal. Even if you don't patch your interiors, then interiors added by mods will still have a little bit of bloom. Who cares? I think this mod is great for people who don't like vanilla Fallout 4's soft and dreamy and blurry look. Me personally, I don't mind it, so I don't use clarity, but you might like it. Next up is Calamity Weathers, which is easy to install. There's no configuration at all, and the mod really doesn't add anything. There's no new textures, no new weathers. All it is a color grading preset, basically. It makes the game look gray and bleak and washed out, and you might like that, but one big problem I have with Calamity Weathers is it makes radiation storms do 3 or 4 times as much damage, which is ridiculous, and there's no way to turn it off unless you go into Fallout 4 Edit and delete that part of the mod. So I would not recommend Calamity Weathers at all. Weather Synergy is a merge of both Vivid Weathers and True Storms. In the installer, you should choose the option to overwrite Vivid Weathers with True Storms Weathers, because apparently there's a bug with the fog if you go the other way around. And with this mod, you can get the cool ghoul hordes during radstorms and the new radstorm effects from True Storms, but everything else will be from Vivid Weathers. So it's the best of both worlds. The Darker Nights mod only does one thing, and that's making nights darker, and there's several different levels of darkness you can choose. And you can install it on top of either Vivid Weathers or True Storms. If you're using Weather Synergy, you'll have to install the mod twice. First, you install it with the True Storms compatibility patch. Then you go into your file system and rename the ESP Darker Nights True Storms.esp. Then you install it again, this time selecting the Vivid Weathers compatibility. And when Mod Organizer tells you it's already installed, you hit Merge. And then you rename that second ESP file. It's a little confusing, but it's not that hard. And unfortunately, Darker Nights doesn't work with any other combination of weather mods, so you can only install it on top of Vanilla, Vivid Weathers, True Storms, or Weather Synergy. That's it. The last mod we'll be looking at is Lightweight Lighting. I actually found this mod 2 days before releasing this video, so I didn't have much testing time with it. But from what I did see, it was pretty good. There's no gameplay effects. It's very similar to Clarity in that it removes all of the bloom and distance blur from the game, or at least most of it, so I like that. But the nights are just a little too dark for my taste, but I'm sure a lot of people will like it. The only problem with this mod is there's no configuration at all. I wish there was a way to make things just a little brighter at night. That would be nice. But the way it is now, it's an all-or-one package deal. So that's my look at most of the weather mods from Fallout 4. I hope I helped you out at least a little bit. I know this video sucked ass. Next time I'll cover a more interesting topic, I hope.